The night is still. You can almost hear the world breathing, the soft pulse of time itself moving beneath the quiet surface of things. In that darkness, memory and myth drift together like fog over forgotten ruins. We tend to think of history as a straight line, a clear path from the primitive to the modern, from shadow to light. But every so often, something appears buried in stone, locked in ice, sealed in silence, that doesn't fit. These objects, these small fragments of strangeness, whisper that the story of humanity may be more tangled than we ever imagined. This is where our journey begins, with a handful of mysterious artifacts, each carrying a question that has outlived its discoverers. They are relics that shouldn't exist, found in places they shouldn't be, crafted with knowledge no one was supposed to have. Some have been studied, replicated, explained away. Others still sit in museums or private collections, wrapped in quiet uncertainty. Whether fact, fraud, or something in between, they all share one quality. They stir the imagination, urging us to look again at what we think we know. Imagine standing in a dim museum hall long after the crowds have gone. The lights are low, the air cool and still. Behind glass, something ancient glimmers faintly, a tool, a carving, a fragment of metal half devoured by rust. You lean closer, expecting clarity, and instead feel a shiver of confusion. How could this exist here, in this layer of earth, in this chapter of history? Who touched it last? What hand shaped it? And what story was it trying to tell? The mind begins to wander, filling in gaps with dreams and possibilities. That's the strange pull of the impossible artifact. It doesn't just challenge archaeologists. It challenges our sense of time itself. It blurs the edges between what is known and what is remembered, between the comfort of established fact and the allure of hidden truth. Maybe that's why such mysteries feel almost soothing. They remind us that even in an age of satellites and simulations, wonder is still possible. The world, it seems, has kept a few secrets for those willing to listen in the dark. Over the next few hours, we will move gently through some of these mysteries, from the sands of ancient Mesopotamia to the icy edges of forgotten maps, from carved stones that seem to show extinct creatures to devices that predict the movements of the stars. We will linger where science ends and speculation begins, not to decide what is true, but to rest in that quiet space where both might be. Each story will unfold slowly, like a dream retold by candlelight. Before we begin, take a breath. Let the noise of the day fall away. The artifacts we're about to explore may not rewrite history, but they invite us to feel history, to sense its heartbeat beneath the surface of ordinary time. There's something deeply human about our fascination with the impossible. It's the same impulse that led us to paint on cave walls, to look at the stars, to ask questions that have no simple answers. These relics, real or imagined, are reminders of that longing. So tonight, as the world outside fades into quiet, we turn to the past, not as scholars or skeptics, but as dreamers. We'll walk through sand and shadow, through archives and myths, following faint traces of those who came before. Some of what we find will be explainable. Some will resist explanation entirely. And that's all right, because in the end, perhaps the purpose of these impossible things isn't to prove anything at all, but to awaken something gentle in us, a sense of wonder that has always been there, waiting. Close your eyes if you like. Picture a desert wind brushing across half-buried ruins. Somewhere beneath that drifting sand, something waits, small, silent, and strange. A spark in the darkness, a question left behind. It's time to uncover it. The desert holds its secrets well. Beneath the endless horizon of ochre sand and dry wind, fragments of forgotten worlds lie waiting. It was in the 1930s, near the outskirts of Baghdad, that a team of workers unearthed something peculiar. A small clay jar, unassuming and weathered, yet unlike anything they expected to find. Inside, they discovered a copper cylinder wrapped around an iron rod, sealed with asphalt. It looked like a vessel, or perhaps a simple storage container. But when scientists examined it more closely, They realized it might be something else entirely, something that could produce a faint electric charge. This discovery became known as the Baghdad Battery, though the name itself is misleading. The object predates our understanding of electricity by more than 1,000 years. Estimated to come from the Parthian period, around 2 centuries before the birth of Christ, it shouldn't have existed. Electricity, as far as we know, was first harnessed in the 18th century. Yet here was a clay jar that seemed to hum with possibility, an ancient riddle disguised as pottery. Imagine standing there, holding it in your hands. The clay is rough, brittle around the edges. The metal inside has corroded to a dull green. You tilt it slightly, and something inside shifts, a sound like history turning over in its sleep. For a moment, it feels as though the object is alive, whispering from across the millennia. What could its makers have intended? Was it a vessel of ritual, a toy, or perhaps, somehow, a tool of forgotten science? Early researchers experimented with replicas of the jar. They filled it with acidic liquids, vinegar, grape juice, even lemon juice, and found that, when combined, these substances could indeed produce a small electrical current. The result was modest, no more than a volt or two, but enough to raise questions that refused to fade. Some suggested that the ancient Persians might have used it to electroplate precious metals, applying thin layers of gold or silver to decorative objects. Others imagined it being used in healing rituals, a soft electric pulse meant to stimulate the body or the spirit. Yet skepticism always followed close behind. Many archaeologists insisted that there was no evidence of electrical use in ancient Mesopotamia. No wires, no conductors, no record in writing or art of lightning tamed by human hands. They argued that the battery-like structure was accidental, perhaps a simple storage jar for scrolls or sacred items. The corrosion patterns could have been natural, the resemblance to a modern battery nothing more than coincidence. Still, the image was too powerful to forget, a flicker of modern technology hidden inside a relic of antiquity. Even now, the Baghdad Battery stands as a kind of paradox, both mundane and miraculous. To the eye, it's just clay, copper, and iron. But in the imagination, it's something far greater, a clue to a civilization whose knowledge may have been deeper than our records reveal. We can almost picture an ancient craftsman in a dim workshop, mixing metals and clay, unaware that centuries later, his simple creation would bewilder the world. There's something mesmerizing about how this artifact bridges the gap between myth and mechanism. Electricity itself has always been seen as a divine force, lightning from the heavens, power beyond comprehension. To think that ancient hands might have harnessed even a flicker of it is to reimagine the past entirely. What if they understood energy in ways that didn't require machines or wires? What if their understanding of nature was rooted not in control, but in harmony, a sacred interplay between matter and spirit? The Baghdad Battery invites these thoughts quietly, without insisting on answers. Perhaps that's why it continues to captivate. The more we examine it, the less we know. Was it truly a battery, or simply a symbol misunderstood? In the calm of a museum display, it sits under glass, its mysteries muted by centuries of silence. Visitors pause, peer at it through the reflection of light, and move on. Yet something lingers in the air, a hum, faint and almost imagined, like a memory trying to return. Science, after all, is not the enemy of mystery, it is its continuation. Each theory about the battery, from the practical to the fantastical, reveals not only our curiosity about the past, but our longing to connect with it. We want to believe that our ancestors were not so different from us, that they too sought to illuminate the dark, to capture the unseen. Maybe the Baghdad Battery was never meant to power anything external. Maybe it was symbolic, a vessel representing life's spark, the divine current that runs through all living things. As the night deepens and we drift between thought and dream, the image of that clay jar remains vivid, small, silent, enduring. A relic of paradox, a spark waiting to be understood. In the shifting sands of Iraq, where empires rose and fell like waves. Something ancient once glowed, however faintly, with light. Perhaps it was never about the electricity itself, but about the human impulse to reach for power beyond comprehension, to touch the divine through craft and curiosity. And as that desert wind moves again, brushing grains of time across buried ruins, another shape begins to emerge from the dark, carved in stone deep within the temples of Egypt, a different kind of light, not from a jar, but from the walls themselves, waiting to be seen once more. Deep beneath the sands of Egypt, in the ancient city of Dendera, there's a temple carved from stone and time. Within its walls, under ceilings heavy with history, lies a series of carvings that have puzzled historians and dreamers alike. Flickering torchlight dances across figures etched thousands of years ago. Priests, lotus flowers, serpents, in a shape that looks strangely familiar to modern eyes. It is long and rounded, its end flared like the base of a bulb, a serpent coiled within its center, and lines extending outward as though carrying a charge. This is the so-called Dendera light, an image that seems to show ancient Egyptians holding something that should not have existed, a light bulb. It is easy to imagine the scene, a quiet chamber deep in the temple of Hathor, goddess of love and the sky. The air is thick and warm, carrying the scent of incense. Shadows play along the walls, and in that dim light, the carvings seem to move. For centuries, these hieroglyphs were interpreted through myth and symbolism. The lotus flower represented creation, the serpent the divine energy that flows through all life. But in the 20th century, as modern technology transformed human understanding, someone looked at the carvings and saw something different. Not a myth, but a machine. According to this alternate reading, the Dendera reliefs depict an ancient form of electrical illumination. The bulb is a glass tube, the snake within it a filament, and the figures holding it are not priests, but engineers of light. The resemblance to early vacuum tubes and lamps is uncanny. This idea first took hold among fringe researchers, but it soon spread to popular imagination. The thought of an ancient civilization wielding electric light long before Edison feels like a spark of forbidden knowledge, a hidden current running through history. Skeptics, of course, have long dismissed this interpretation. Egyptologists explain that the carvings are purely symbolic, that the bulb-shaped form is in fact a representation of the Harsamtis, a deity emerging from a lotus flower. The snake symbolizes energy and rebirth, not electricity. The lines that resemble cords are decorative stems or cosmic rays. To scholars, there is nothing mechanical about the image. It is a scene of mythic creation, the birth of light as a divine force rather than a physical one. And yet, even with such logical explanations, the image retains its strange power. Something about it refuses to let the imagination rest. When one stands beneath the reliefs, gazing up at those stone lamps, there's a sense that the past is watching back, amused by how we project our own knowledge onto its mysteries. Perhaps we see a bulb because we want to see a bulb. Perhaps every age remakes history in its own image. Still, the temple holds other curiosities. In some chambers, the walls are blackened as though from smoke. Yet in others, particularly those with delicate paintings and vibrant color, there are no traces of soot at all. How? Some ask, could ancient artists have painted in the dark depths of these temples without firelight? Torches and oil lamps would have scarred the ceilings with residue. Could they have found another way? The question lingers, even if science leans towards simpler answers. Polished bronze mirrors, shafts of sunlight directed through openings, or the careful timing of work at midday when the light was brightest. But the human heart prefers wonder to explanation. To imagine Egyptian priests walking through corridors illuminated by a gentle glow, not fire, but something pure, is to touch the edge of an older dream. That knowledge once lost might still be rediscovered. The Dendera light becomes, in this way, a symbol of our longing to connect with a civilization that seemed to know more than it should have. We wonder if perhaps the ancients weren't merely primitive but were guardians of a deeper wisdom, one expressed through symbol, art, and ritual rather than science as we define it. In that sense, the carving may not depict a literal light, but it still is a kind of light, a symbolic illumination that bridges the divine and the material. Whether one sees a lamp or a lotus, the message remains the same: the birth of light out of darkness, the moment when knowledge first stirs. The Egyptians, with their deep reverence for cycles of life and death, might have understood illumination not as invention, but as awakening, a truth that burns quietly within all living things. Perhaps that is why the Dendera light continues to fascinate. It is not just about technology, but about perception, about how we read the past through the lens of our own desires. Every theory about the carving reveals something about the people proposing it. To the scientist, it's an error to be corrected. To the mystic, it's a message from an enlightened age. To the dreamer, it's proof that the world still holds corners of wonder, places where logic falters and imagination takes over. As the mind drifts deeper into the story, the boundaries blur between metaphor and mechanism. You can almost see it. The temple's chambers glowing softly, priests moving like shadows across stone floors, the hum of energy that isn't quite electrical but somehow feels alive. Maybe it isn't about bulbs or circuits at all. Maybe the Dendera light was always meant to illuminate something else entirely: the inner flame of curiosity, the eternal desire to understand. Outside the temple, the desert stretches endlessly under a sky full of stars. The same stars those ancient priests once watched still shimmer in the same constellations. The light above is timeless, and in it, perhaps, the past and present meet for a moment, the glow of memory reflected in the eye of the dreamer. The Dendera light, whether miracle of myth or misread of stone, continues to shine in that quiet intersection between truth and wonder. And as the night deepens, that strange light fades into another, a metallic gleam from the depths of the sea, where an ancient shipwreck hides something far more intricate, gears turning in silence, waiting to be discovered. Beneath the calm waters of the Aegean Sea, time itself once seemed to stop. In the year 1900, a group of sponge divers seeking fortune and coral near the small Greek island of Antikythera made a discovery that would echo through history. They had come across a shipwreck, an ancient cargo vessel, its wooden frame long decayed, its treasures scattered across the ocean floor like forgotten memories. Among the bronze statues, amphorae, and fragments of marble, one diver noticed a strange lump of corroded metal, fused together with stone. It seemed unremarkable at first, just another relic claimed by the sea. But inside that encrusted shape, hidden beneath centuries of salt and silence, gears were waiting, intricate, interlocking, deliberate. When the artifact was raised from the depths and studied in the light of day, it confounded everyone who saw it. Scholars and archaeologists stared at the bronze fragments, noting the precision of the gear teeth, the careful inscriptions faintly etched on its surfaces. It was unlike anything from a known ancient world. Machines with such complexity were thought impossible before the Renaissance. And yet here was something built more than 2,000 years ago. It became known as the Antikythera mechanism, a clockwork device so advanced that it would not be replicated again for over a millennium. Holding it today, even in its reconstructed form, one can sense the genius behind it. Dozens of bronze gears meshed together, turning with mathematical harmony, each calibrated to represent celestial motion. It could track the positions of the sun and moon, predict eclipses, and possibly even chart the movements of planets. Scholars believe it may have been designed to model the heavens, a portable cosmos, a mechanical echo of divine order. The Greeks, after all, saw the universe as a place of perfect geometry, where the movements of celestial bodies were reflections of cosmic harmony. To them, the mechanism was not merely a tool, but a revelation. Imagine the hands that built it. An ancient craftsman, perhaps working under the guidance of a philosopher or mathematician, carving precise gear teeth by lamplight, guided by nothing more than thought and touch. Each piece had to be perfect, each rotation aligned with the next. In that moment, science and art were one and the same, the physical embodiment of curiosity. Some researchers believe it was inspired by the work of Hipparchus, one of Greece's greatest astronomers, or even that it came from the legendary mind of Archimedes. Whoever created it, they understood the sky in ways that feel almost supernatural for their time. The more the device is studied, the stranger it becomes. Modern imaging, using X-rays and 3D reconstruction, has revealed inscriptions that describe its purpose. References to cycles of the moon, solar phases, and the timing of athletic games like the Olympics. It was in essence the world's first analog computer. Yet after its discovery, the technology seemed to vanish. No other machine of comparable sophistication would appear again until the intricate clocks of the Middle Ages. How could such knowledge exist, then disappear completely? Was the mechanism a singular creation, or one of many lost to fire, war, and forgetfulness? The Antikythera mechanism forces us to confront the fragility of human progress. History, we often imagine, moves forward in a steady climb, each generation building on the last. But this artifact suggests otherwise, that knowledge can bloom brilliantly, then fade like a spark in the dark. Civilizations rise not just on invention, but on memory, and when that memory is lost, so too is everything it carried. The mechanism feels like a ghost of that forgotten brilliance, proof that genius is not confined to any one age. For some, though, the device invites wilder interpretations. Could it have come from an older civilization, now erased from history? Was it a relic of Atlantis, or some pre-Diluvian culture whose understanding of the stars was far beyond ours? Such theories, while dismissed by scholars, persist in the popular imagination. There's something irresistibly haunting about the idea of lost technology, of an ancient world whose tools were both mechanical and mystical, designed to bridge the gap between earth and heaven. Standing before the fragments in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, one feels both awe and melancholy. Behind the glass, the mechanism lies silent, its bronze darkened and pitted. Yet there is a strange sense of life in it still, as though it remembers movement, as though the gears long to turn again. Visitors lean closer, searching its surfaces for meaning, for proof of the brilliance that once was. The faint inscriptions, almost erased by time, whisper to those who listen, "We knew more than you think." The story of the Antikythera mechanism is not just about invention. It's about rediscovery. Each new study, each new scan, reveals a little more of the ancient mind, how they saw the sky, how they sought to order chaos. And perhaps most moving of all is the thought that this device, once carried on a ship across the Aegean, was lost not by design, but by accident. A storm, a sinking, the quiet swallowing of knowledge by the sea. If it had arrived safely, how different might history have been? As we imagine those waves closing over the wreck, the bronze device slipping into darkness, it becomes easy to feel that the mechanism was never truly lost, only waiting for curious minds to find it again, to remember that even in the distant past, humans were reaching for the stars with the same hunger for understanding we feel today. The divers who found it could not have known that they were holding a riddle that would take a century to begin to solve. And still, it resists complete comprehension. Its purpose is mapped, yet its spirit remains mysterious, a relic that shouldn't exist, and yet does, proof that our ancestors were capable of wonders we can scarcely imagine. And as that ancient clockwork rests in its glass case, the story of forgotten technology leads us far from the sea, across oceans and continents, to the high deserts of Peru, where another mystery waits, carved not in metal, but in stone, depicting impossible creatures and scenes from a world that never should have been. In the vast, dry expanse of the Peruvian desert, where the wind hums softly over stones and the horizon blurs in a heat, there lies a collection of carved mysteries that have divided historians and dreamers for decades. They are known as the Ica stones, thousands upon thousands of smooth river rocks, each etched with strange and intricate images. Some are small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, others large enough to fill a lap. At first glance, they appear like simple archaeological curiosities, but a closer look reveals something deeply unsettling. On their surfaces are scenes that should be impossible: men and dinosaurs side by side, complex surgical procedures, telescopes, maps of lost continents, and even flying machines. If genuine, these stones would rewrite the history of humanity entirely. The story began in the 1960s, when a local Peruvian farmer named Basilio Usquia claimed to have discovered the stones in a desert cave near the town of Ica. He brought some to a local physician, Dr. Javier Cabrera, who quickly became fascinated by their content. Cabrera began collecting them obsessively, eventually amassing more than 10,000. He devoted his life to studying their engravings, convinced they were evidence of an advanced prehistoric civilization that once thrived before recorded history, a civilization that knew the secrets of medicine, astronomy, and perhaps even interstellar travel. Cabrera's collection became a museum of sorts, shelves lined with smooth black stones, each one a window into a forgotten world. Visitors would come to see the strange depictions: men performing organ transplants, maps of ancient continents that resembled modern geological models, and humans riding what looked unmistakably like dinosaurs. The carvings seemed to portray a history utterly different from what textbooks teach, a history where science and myth intertwined freely, where ancient humanity reached peaks of knowledge only to vanish without a trace. But with such extraordinary claims came equal skepticism. Archaeologists who examined the stones found no clear context, no verified site of discovery, no stratified layers, no documentation of excavation. The engravings themselves, when tested, showed signs of modern tooling. Under magnification, the grooves appeared too fresh, lacking the weathering expected from ancient carvings. When pressed by authorities, Basilio Usquia admitted to fabricating many of the stones himself. He confessed that he and others carved them to sell to tourists, using dental drills and simple tools. Yet later, in another interview, he retracted his confession, claiming he had only said it to avoid prosecution for selling antiquities. Thus the cycle of doubt continued: confession, denial, wonder, disbelief. Even after Usquia's statements, the Ica stones refused to fade into obscurity. The sheer scale of the collection, the consistency of the imagery, and the beauty of the carvings captivated those who wanted to believe there was more to the story. Dr. Cabrera held firm to his conviction until his death, insisting the stones were genuine. He spoke softly of an ancient, enlightened race, a civilization that coexisted with dinosaurs and left behind these stones as messages to future humanity, a reminder of cycles of rise and collapse. In his vision, the stones were not evidence of fraud, but fragments of memory, proof that knowledge is cyclical, not linear. There is something poetic in that belief, even if it may not be factual. The Ica stones, whether authentic or fabricated, reflect a deep human yearning, the desire to find wonder where science leaves silence. They remind us that myths do not die easily. They adapt, evolving into mirrors of our own imagination. For the believers, the stones whisper of lost wisdom and forgotten epics. For the skeptics, they're a cautionary tale about how easily truth can be shaped by longing. But perhaps both views contain a kind of truth, one factual, the other emotional. Imagine the man carving them, whether ancient artisan or modern forger, tracing lines in a stone by candlelight. Perhaps he felt, as we do, the strange thrill of connecting to something larger, of making history tangible. In that act, even if it began as a hoax, he participated in an ancient human impulse to leave a mark that will outlast his lifetime. The grooves on those stones, real or not, carry the fingerprints of curiosity itself. As you picture them now, thousands of stones gleaming in the dim light of Cabrera's museum, there's a haunting stillness to the room. The air is dry and faintly metallic. Each carving seems to hum with potential, like a secret waiting for the right dreamer to decipher it. You can almost imagine the stories shifting when no one is watching, the creatures on the stones stirring in their sleep, their outlines blurring into myth once more. Whether they are genuine remnants of a lost civilization or the creative fabrications of modern minds, the Ica stones continue to occupy that liminal space between belief and doubt. They invite us to question what it means to know something, whether truth lies only in evidence or if it sometimes hides in the spaces that evidence cannot reach. Perhaps that is why they continue to fascinate. They remind us that mystery, even when exposed as illusion, retains its power. It lingers not in the artifact itself, but in the human response, the quiet gasp of wonder, the fragile hope that history still holds surprises. As night deepens over the desert, the wind moves across the sand, burying and uncovering stones that have lain undisturbed for centuries. Somewhere, another rock may still rest beneath the surface, its carvings waiting to be found. Real or imagined, each one carries the same message. The past is not gone, only hidden, and sometimes it reveals itself in the most improbable forms. Beyond the deserts of Peru, however, another artifact waits, not carved in smooth black stone, but forged from metal, encased in solid rock, a tool that seems impossibly ancient. From a shifting sands of mystery, the story now moves to Texas, where a hammer found in stone challenges time itself. It was the summer of 1936 when a small group of hikers wandered through the quiet hills near London, Texas, a rural town of wide skies, red earth, and silence broken only by cicadas. The land there was rich with fossils, layers of ancient stone that told stories of oceans and creatures long vanished. One of the hikers, a man named Max Hahn, noticed something strange embedded in a slab of rock beside a creek bed. It was a piece of wood and iron, half exposed, yet perfectly encased within a solid mass of stone. The object seemed ordinary at first glance, a simple hammer, but its presence there, locked inside rock believed to be hundreds of millions of years old, made it extraordinary. When Hahn brought it home, curiosity spread quickly. The hammer was examined by friends, local collectors, and eventually researchers. The head was made of iron, smooth and shaped with remarkable precision. The handle, partly turned to coal, seemed ancient beyond comprehension. Tests suggested that the rocks surrounding the hammer dated back to the Cretaceous period, roughly 400 million years ago, long before humans were supposed to exist. How could a man-made tool be trapped inside such an ancient formation? It was as if someone had reached backward through time and left behind a whisper of civilization in the age of giant reptiles. In later years, the object became known simply as the London Hammer, a name that carried with it both weight and enigma. Some hailed it as proof of advanced civilizations predating all known history. Others saw in it a challenge to the foundations of science itself. If the hammer truly was as old as the rock encasing it, then the timeline of humanity would have to be rewritten from the ground up. For those inclined toward mystery, it was irresistible, a tangible sign that our understanding of the world was, perhaps, only partial. But as with most mysteries, the story is layered, and truth hides beneath sediment and belief alike. Geologists offered a simpler explanation. The stone around the hammer might not be as ancient as it appeared. Minerals, under certain conditions, can rapidly form hard concretions around buried objects, sometimes in just decades, not millennia. According to this view, the hammer had likely been left behind by settlers in the 19th century, its wooden handle fossilized by mineral seepage, the surrounding concretion giving the illusion of immense age. It was not a relic of a forgotten race, but of a more recent craftsman whose tool simply became encased in nature's slow artistry. Yet the allure of the impossible persisted. Those who saw the hammer in person often described a peculiar sensation, that unsettling blend of doubt and wonder, the awareness that even if science could explain the formation, the sight of it still defied expectation. The iron head was free of significant rust, as though it had been shielded from time. Its craftsmanship was elegant and functional, the design too familiar to dismiss easily as coincidence. The handle, darkened by age, carried the ghost of human touch. It was an object out of place, an intruder in the fossil record, an invitation to dream. Imagine holding it for a moment. The metal is cool, dense, and perfectly balanced. The handle feels fragile, as if it might crumble in your grasp. You lift it gently, aware that whether it is 4,000 or 400 million years old, it carries the same quiet mystery, the evidence of creation. In that moment, the hammer becomes more than a debate about geology or forgery. It becomes a bridge connecting the human impulse to build with the timeless patience of the earth itself. Throughout the decades, the London hammer has found a home among collections of so-called out-of-place artifacts, objects that seem to belong to impossible timelines. It is displayed not in the great halls of museums, but in smaller, quieter corners, private exhibits, roadside curiosities, and online archives of wonder. Visitors peer through glass at the stone-encased relic and whisper their theories. Some believe it to be a relic of antediluvian times, perhaps from civilization destroyed in a great flood. Others imagine travelers from the future, their tools accidentally lost in the distant past. Whatever the truth, the hammer's existence speaks to something deeply human, the tension between explanation and mystery. Our minds crave order, but our hearts yearn for wonder. Science tells us that the hammer is likely a geological coincidence, a trick of mineralization and time. But the imagination tells another story, one where the line between myth and material blurs, and the impossible becomes briefly, beautifully plausible. When we look at such artifacts, we are not just seeking proof of the past. We are searching for reassurance that the world is still capable of surprising us, that there remain cracks in the walls of certainty through which awe can slip. Whether the London hammer was forged by an ancient hand or a pioneer's tool lost to sediment, it holds that quiet power. It reminds us that history is not always a clean record, but a collage of stories, some true, some invented, all meaningful. As night settles over the Texas hills, the image of that hammer lingers. You can almost hear it, the faint metallic echo of its head striking stone, a rhythm that reverberates through time. It is a sound that belongs to all builders, ancient and modern, a heartbeat of creation. The creek still flows near the place it was found, wearing down the rock grain by grain, as if slowly revealing that time itself is the greatest sculptor. And when we leave the mystery of the hammer behind, we travel next toward another enigma, one carved not by iron or clay, but by human hands in pure crystal. In the jungles of Central America, shimmering beneath the light, lie the crystal skulls, faces of forgotten gods that seem to gaze straight through the centuries. In the thick jungles of Central America, where the canopy swallows light and time itself feels suspended in green silence, a legend gleams faintly in the dark, the tale of the crystal skulls. These objects, carved from single blocks of quartz crystal, are said to be perfect beyond the reach of primitive tools. They appear in myths and museum cases alike, gleaming under dim lights like trapped souls, their empty eyes holding both clarity and mystery. Some believe they are relics of the ancient Maya. Others claim they come from Atlantis, or even from beings beyond the stars. Whatever their origin, they continue to shimmer at the edge of science and superstition, symbols of the strange conversation between what we can touch and what we can never fully understand. The most famous of these artifacts surfaced in the 1920s, when an explorer named Frederick Mitchell Hedges claimed to have discovered one deep in the Mayan ruins of Lebanton, Belize. According to his story, his adopted daughter, Anna, found the skull glinting in a collapsed temple, sunlight catching its surface like fire. The skull was almost life-sized, carved from clear quartz, its jaw movable, its features eerily human. To those who saw it, it seemed to possess an energy, a quiet, almost electric presence. Some swore it caused strange sensations when held, that it hummed faintly, or that lights appeared within it when the sun touched its edges. Mitchell Hedges called it the Skull of Doom, claiming it was used in ancient ceremonies where priests summoned gods or saw visions of the future. The story captured imaginations worldwide. Other crystal skulls began appearing in museums, private collections, and markets, each with its own alleged origin and legend. There was the Paris skull, the British Museum skull, the Smithsonian skull. Some are made of smoky quartz, others of milky white or rose-tinted crystal. The craftsmanship was astonishing, smooth, precise, symmetrical. Under magnification, however, scientists began to notice details that cast doubt on their ancient origin. The tool marks were consistent not with Stone Age techniques, but with modern rotary tools, the kind developed in the 19th century. It appeared that many, if not all, of the skulls were products of later centuries, perhaps crafted in Europe for collectors fascinated by the mysteries of the New World. Still, the myth refused to fade. Even as laboratory tests dated them to modern times, stories of their supernatural properties persisted. People spoke of skulls that glowed faintly, that changed temperature when touched, that caused dreams or visions. Some New Age believers claimed the skulls stored ancient knowledge, data encoded in their crystalline structure, like cosmic hard drives left behind by a lost civilization. 13 skulls, they said, existed in total, and when brought together, they would reveal humanity's forgotten history or unlock a shift in consciousness. The legend grew, blending ancient prophecy with modern mysticism until it became less about archaeology and more about awakening. There is something almost poetic about the way the skulls straddle those two worlds. On one hand, they are works of art, delicate, exquisite, undeniable in their beauty. On the other, they are portals for belief, vessels for humanity's oldest impulse, to see divinity in the reflection of our own faces. A skull, after all, is both a reminder of death and a symbol of life. In crystal form, it becomes immortal, transparent yet eternal, fragile yet enduring. It mirrors the paradox of existence itself, the clarity of truth and the opacity of mystery. Standing before one of these skulls, it's hard not to feel something, not necessarily supernatural, but deeply human. The way light passes through the quartz feels alive, as if the stone breathes. The hollows of the eyes seem to follow you, not menacingly, but curiously, as if asking whether you see them or merely see yourself reflected within. The skulls seem to hold silence as a substance, a kind of concentrated stillness that draws the mind inward. Whether they are genuine relics or clever forgeries hardly matters in that moment. What matters is their presence, their quiet insistence that not everything must be explained to be meaningful. Skeptics argue that the persistence of the crystal skull legend says more about us than about the stones themselves. We crave mystery. We need to believe that somewhere, someone once held knowledge that transcended time and reason. The skulls become a kind of mirror for our yearning, to believe that humanity has forgotten more than it has learned, that our ancestors knew secrets we have yet to rediscover. The truth, however, may be simpler and perhaps more beautiful, that in creating mystery, we also create meaning. The power of the skulls lies not in their age, but in the stories they've inspired. The journey of these artifacts, from temple ruins to glass museum cases, mirrors the human passage from faith to reason, from myth to measurement. Yet even in the bright light of modern analysis, something in them resists full illumination. The skulls seem to remind us that the ancient and the modern are not opposites, but partners in an eternal dialogue, logic seeking wonder, and wonder giving logic its soul. The quartz from which they are carved was born from the Earth's slow fires, compressed and transformed over millions of years. To shape such material into the likeness of a human head is, in itself, an act of reverence, a sculptor's attempt to converse with eternity. Even those who dismiss their legends cannot deny the comfort of their glow. They are, in the end, objects of meditation, vessels for thought. To gaze into one is to glimpse the intersection of art, science, and spirituality. Some say that when candlelight flickers through the skull's hollow eyes, it reveals what every artifact tries to say in its own way. That the past is not gone but dreaming, and that every mystery, no matter how debunked, carries within it the pulse of wonder that keeps humanity awake to its own story. As the image of the crystal skull fades, the mind drifts northward once again, away from the warmth of jungle temples toward the cold precision of maps drawn centuries ago. On the surface of ancient parchment lies another enigma, one not carved in stone or crystal but inked in elegant strokes. A map that charts coastlines no one should have known, a glimpse of lands long hidden under ice. In the dim light of a 16th century study, a man bends over a vast sheet of parchment, quill in hand, drawing coastlines that ripple with uncanny accuracy. The year is 1513, and the man is Pyri Reis, an Ottoman admiral, cartographer, and scholar of the seas. Around him are tools of his trade: compasses, rulers, old maps gathered from travelers and sailors, fragments of knowledge stitched together from distant voyages. The candle beside him burns low, casting shadows across the parchment as he traces out a world few had ever seen in its entirety. When he is finished, he looks down upon his creation, a map that should not exist. The Pyri Reis map, rediscovered centuries later in the Topkapi Palace of Istanbul, would become one of the most puzzling documents in the history of cartography. At first glance, it appears to be a beautifully rendered map of the Atlantic world. The western coasts of Europe and Africa, the eastern coasts of South America, and something far stranger extending into the southernmost regions. There, beyond the familiar contours of known lands, lies what appears to be Antarctica, not as a frozen wasteland, but as a temperate coastline free of ice, depicted with remarkable precision. According to modern geological studies, that coastline has been buried beneath thick glaciers for thousands of years. So how could an admiral in 1513, long before Antarctica was even officially discovered, have mapped it so accurately? The map's own annotations add to the mystery. Written in Ottoman Turkish, Pyri Reis explains that his map was not entirely his own creation, but a synthesis drawn from older charts, some said to date back to the time of Alexander the Great. Among his sources, he claimed, were ancient maps preserved by sailors and maps drawn in the days of the pharaohs. It was also rumored that he had access to lost works from the Library of Alexandria, and perhaps even maps once owned by Christopher Columbus himself. Whatever the truth, the result was a document that seemed to combine modern and ancient knowledge into something impossible. When scholars in the 20th century examined the Pyri Reis map, they were astonished. The proportions of the South American coastline matched modern satellite images with uncanny accuracy. More baffling still was the depiction of what seemed to be Antarctica's Queen Maud Land, shown without ice, as though the mapmaker had seen the continent during a period when its surface was still visible. If true, this would suggest the original source maps dated back to a time before the last ice age. More than 6,000 years ago, long before human civilization was thought to possess the ability to chart coastlines or navigate oceans. For some, the implications were thrilling. The map became proof, they said, that an advanced ancient civilization once roamed the earth, a maritime culture whose knowledge of geography, mathematics, and astronomy far surpassed that of the early modern world. Perhaps they were the survivors of Atlantis or another lost world erased by time, but remembered in fragments passed from hand to hand, century after century. The Pyri Reis map was, in this vision, not a miracle of Ottoman scholarship, but the echo of something far older, the ghost of a forgotten science whispering through history. Skeptics, however, offered more grounded explanations. They pointed out that the coastline identified as Antarctica might actually represent a distorted view of South America, stretched southward by errors in projection common in early maps. Others argued that the appearance of an ice-free Antarctica was simply coincidence, a trick of interpretation fueled by wishful thinking. After all, Cartography in the early 16th century was as much art as it was science, and sailors often filled unknown spaces with conjecture or imagination. Even Pyre Rees himself admitted that his sources were fragmented and sometimes inconsistent. To him, the map was not an act of revelation, but of synthesis, a collage of the world as known through rumor, voyage, and legend. Yet despite rational explanations, the sense of mystery remains. There is something undeniably haunting about the precision of the map, the elegance of its script, and the fact that it seems to reach beyond its own era. Whether through lost data or sheer coincidence, the Pyre Rees map feels like a window that briefly opens onto an older version of the Earth, one where ice had not yet sealed the poles, and continents stretched in shapes, now hidden beneath frozen silence. It evokes a world that existed before ours, and perhaps a memory of the people who once knew it. The story of the map also reflects something timeless in human curiosity. Pyre Rees himself was a man of the boundary, a sailor navigating between myth and measurement, empire and imagination. His map, for all its mystery, was an act of faith in knowledge, a belief that by tracing the edges of the known, one might glimpse the infinite. Whether he consciously embedded the secrets of lost ages or simply captured the best information of his time, his work continues to remind us that exploration is not just about discovery. It's about how we interpret what we find. Imagine him again, standing over the parchment, the smell of ink and sea salt mingling in the air. Outside, the sound of waves against the docks of Istanbul, sailors shouting in a dozen languages. The world was expanding then, maps redrawn daily as new coasts were sighted. Yet amid that surge of discovery, there remained an undercurrent of the ancient, the sense that the earth itself was not new, only rediscovered. Perhaps Pyre Rees felt it too, the faint hum of inherited memory guiding his hand. Today, when we look at the Pyre Rees map under museum glass, the faded lines still pulse with quiet energy. The parchment, cracked and yellowed, holds more than ink. It holds the imprint of centuries of human wonder. The lines between continents are also the lines between eras, between what we know and what we long to believe. The map stands as both a document of its time and a doorway into something deeper, a reminder that even the act of mapping, of defining, contains within it the endlessness of mystery. And as the map fades from view, our journey continues, from coastlines drawn in ink to something far more tangible and strange. Beneath the soil of ancient cities, not on parchment, but in stone and metal, lie discoveries that seem to bridge epochs. Among them, a small mechanism from the Aegean Sea, a relic so advanced it would not be understood for nearly 2,000 years. Beneath the shimmering waters off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, a team of sponge divers in the early 1900s stumbled upon the remains of an ancient shipwreck. The sea there was calm, but heavy with history, the kind of blue that hides more than it reveals. As the divers surfaced, they brought with them treasures, marble statues, bronze artifacts, and fragments of pottery, relics of a lost vessel that had sunk nearly 2,000 years ago. But among the recovered objects, encrusted with barnacles and green corrosion, lay something that defied understanding. It was small and fragile, no larger than a shoebox, a mass of gears and corroded metal plates fused together by centuries of salt and time. At first, it seemed like nothing more than debris. Yet when scholars began to examine it, they realized they were looking at something impossible, a machine far more advanced than anything believed to exist in the ancient world. This artifact would come to be known as the Antikythera mechanism, a device that has been called the world's first computer. Even in its corroded state, its sophistication is breathtaking. Within its case lay a network of interlocking gears, each tooth carefully cut, each motion calibrated to perfection. When reconstructed, the mechanism revealed its purpose. It could track the movements of the sun and moon, predict eclipses, and even mark the timing of the ancient Olympic Games. Some researchers believe it also charted the positions of planets, allowing its user to model the heavens with precision centuries ahead of its time. It was not merely a clock. It was a cosmos in miniature, a mechanical universe born from bronze and genius. For historians, its existence posed a dilemma. How could a machine of such complexity have been made in the 1st century BCE, when Europe's known technology was thought to be limited to simple tools and water-driven devices? The gears of the Antikythera mechanism required a level of mathematical and mechanical skill not thought possible until the invention of elaborate clocks during the Renaissance, nearly 1,500 years later. This was not a rough prototype or a lucky accident. It was the product of mastery, of a tradition of engineering that must have had earlier examples, now lost to history. The Antikythera mechanism did not appear out of nowhere. It hinted at a forgotten lineage of knowledge. Scholars have speculated endlessly about who might have built it. Some attribute it to the followers of Archimedes, the legendary mathematician of Syracuse, whose brilliance was said to border on magic. Others believe it could have been crafted in Rhodes, an island known for its astronomical schools and mechanical artistry. The philosopher Cicero once wrote of a device created by Archimedes that could replicate the movements of the heavens, a description that eerily echoes what the Antikythera mechanism achieves. Perhaps this was one of those devices or a descendant of them. If so, then somewhere between Archimedes' time and the shipwreck that carried it to the sea floor, the ancient world reached a technological height that would be forgotten for nearly 2 millennia. Holding the idea of that loss feels both wondrous and tragic. Imagine the craftsman who built it, bent over bronze plates under lamplight, hands dark with soot and oil, gears clicking softly as he tests the movement of the stars. He is surrounded not by computers or laboratories, but by scrolls, ink, and calculation. Each motion he measures by hand, each equation carried in his mind. The world outside his workshop knows gods and myths, yet here he measures divinity in rotation and ratio, translating celestial rhythms into mechanical language. To create such a thing required more than knowledge. It required faith that the cosmos could be understood and that its order could be captured in a wheel of human making. When modern scientists used X-ray imaging to study the Antikythera fragments, they uncovered inscriptions that served as a kind of manual, faint Greek letters etched into the bronze. These markings described planetary movements, calendars, and cycles of eclipses. The gears were arranged in a way that mirrored the celestial harmonies of the Pythagoreans, who believed the universe sang in mathematical perfection. The more researchers uncovered, the clearer it became that the mechanism was not just a tool, but a statement, a declaration of the ancient human belief that order lay beneath chaos, that if one understood the gears of the cosmos, one might also understand the nature of time itself. And then came the unsettling realization. If such a device existed, where were the others? The Antikythera mechanism is too complex to have been a singular creation. It suggests a lineage of engineering, perhaps even a workshop or tradition dedicated to the mechanical study of the skies. Yet no other examples have ever been found. It is as though history chose to preserve only one whisper of a forgotten chapter, a single surviving fragment of a civilization's greater genius. The wrecked ship that carried it might have been transporting it from a library or temple, its creator's name already lost to waves and years. For some, the existence of the mechanism invites a wilder thought, that perhaps humanity's history is not a steady climb from ignorance to enlightenment, but a cycle of rises and falls where knowledge blooms, withers, and is reborn. The device becomes not just an artifact, but a metaphor. The earth turns, civilizations rise, and every few thousand years, someone rediscovers how to capture the motion of the heavens in the palm of their hand. Whether this is poetry or truth, no one can say. But it lingers, that haunting feeling that genius, like the stars, may be eternal, flickering out only to shine again. When viewed today, encased in glass at the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, the Antikythera mechanism glows faintly under controlled light, a patchwork of bronze and shadow. Around it, the whispers of the sea seem to echo in the quiet halls. Visitors stand before it, and see not just metal, but memory, a reminder that brilliance is not bound to eras or tools. Somewhere, deep within those gears, is the pulse of curiosity itself, still turning after 2,000 years. And as our gaze drifts away from the delicate machinery of the ancient world, we find ourselves standing before another mystery of human craftsmanship, one less mechanical, but no less baffling. In the dense jungles of Colombia, vast stones lie carved into intricate patterns, symbols, and faces. Some call them remnants of lost civilizations. Others see in them something older, something that does not quite fit into the timeline of our known past. The next story belongs to the sacred stones of San Agustin, monuments of forgotten hands and quiet power. In the misty highlands of southern Colombia, where the Magdalena River cuts its slow path through valleys veiled in fog, the landscape begins to shift into something ancient and silent. The trees grow taller there, their roots clutching the earth like memories that refuse to fade. Along narrow trails where moss softens every stone, one begins to see them. Great figures carved into rock, their eyes hollow and still, their expressions both human and otherworldly. This is San Agustin, a place where stone breathes, and where the past stands upright among the living. The statues scattered across this region, numbering in the hundreds, are unlike anything else in the Americas. Some rise more than 4 meters high. Others squat like guardians, their arms folded over their chests. Many are carved from volcanic rock, their surfaces weathered by centuries of rain and wind. They depict gods, warriors, jaguars, eagles, serpents, and beings that seem part man, part beast. Some wear intricate headdresses. Others hold small figures or objects whose meaning has been lost. Around them lie tombs and altars, arranged with careful precision. Together, they form one of the greatest archaeological enigmas of South America, a stone necropolis left behind by a civilization that vanished without a trace. The people of San Agustin left no written records, no scrolls, no legends passed down in language we can read. What they left instead are these stones, heavy, mute, eternal. Their carvings speak in geometry and form, in the curve of an eyebrow or the tilt of a mouth. Scholars believe the site was active between the 1st and 8th century CE, yet even that is uncertain. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the region, the builders were long gone, their culture dissolved into myth. The modern world rediscovered the statues only in fragments, buried beneath centuries of soil and jungle. To this day, no one knows what drove the civilization to create such immense works, or why it disappeared so completely. Archaeologists have proposed many theories. Some believe San Agustin was a sacred ceremonial center, where the living communed with the dead. Others see it as a city of gods, a place of pilgrimage that represented the cosmic order, heaven, earth, and the underworld connected through sculpture and stone. The carving's symmetrical beauty and symbolic complexity suggest a sophisticated understanding of both art and spirituality. The jaguar motifs, for instance, may symbolize transformation or the crossing of worlds, while the figures with crossed arms and wide eyes might represent shamans in trance, caught between human and divine states of being. But beyond the archaeological theories, there lingers a deeper mystery, one that touches something instinctual in those who visit. The scale of San Agustin feels disproportionate to the tools its builders were thought to possess. The precision of the carvings, the hardness of the volcanic stone, the perfect alignment of monuments, all seem to hint at knowledge beyond what the early cultures of the Andes were believed to have. Some fringe researchers have suggested that these monuments predate even the known civilizations of the region, remnants of a lost age erased by time or cataclysm. Others draw parallels to the statues of Easter Island, noting the similar watchfulness in their faces, the same solemn defiance of decay. Standing among them, one begins to feel the weight of their silence. There's a kind of serenity in it, a calm that belongs to something older than human memory. The air seems thicker here, as though the stones themselves exhale a kind of gravity. Birds perch on the shoulders of statues that have watched centuries pass, unaware of being observed in return. And at dusk, when mist curls through the valleys and the forest darkens, the faces seem to shift in the half-light, their eyes catching the fading sun, their mouths softening into something almost alive. Some local legends, whispered in the villages nearby, say the statues are not carvings at all, but ancient beings turned to stone. They were once the guardians of a great people, it is said, and when their time ended, they froze in place to keep watch over the land forever. Others tell of gods who descended from the sky, teaching art and agriculture, then vanished again, leaving their likenesses behind as reminders. Such tales blur the boundary between myth and memory, between the history we can prove and the stories we feel to be true. Modern science, of course, remains cautious. Dating the stones has proven difficult, and interpretations vary widely. But even the most skeptical researchers admit that San Agustin stands apart. The site's scale and sophistication seem to belong to a much larger, more interconnected world than once assumed. One where ideas, symbols, and craftsmanship may have traveled vast distances long before written history acknowledges such contact. Each statue becomes a chapter in a language of stone that no one yet knows how to read. At night, when the stars emerge over the Andean plateau, the statues stand in perfect stillness, their forms lit by moonlight. It is easy to imagine the ancient ceremonies that once took place here. Fires burning, chants rising, offerings laid at the feet of gods carved from the earth itself. The rhythm of drums would have echoed through the valleys, mingling with the cries of night birds, and the people would have looked up at the same constellations we see today, perhaps asking the same questions. What lies beyond? Where do we come from? How long do we truly endure? San Agustin is not just a ruin. It is a reminder of humanity's recurring conversation with the unknown. Its statues do not offer answers. They pose questions in the form of enduring faces, questions about death, continuity, and the possibility that knowledge once known has been lost and waits to be remembered. Whether they represent gods, ancestors, or something else entirely, they stand as witnesses to the idea that creation itself is an act of mystery. As dawn touches the mountains, light begins to seep through the mist, illuminating one statue after another. Their forms glow faintly, like sentinels waking from sleep. In that quiet moment, the line between the past and the present feels thin, almost transparent. You can almost hear the whisper of chisels striking stone, the murmured prayers of artisans who believe their work could outlast death. And when we turn away from these solemn guardians, the path ahead leads us far from the jungles of Colombia to the deserts of ancient Mesopotamia, a place where clay tablets tell of a sky that once fell to earth. There, an artifact from Sumerian legend waits to be remembered, a wedge of black stone inscribed with impossible stars, known today as the Sumerian King List. In the cradle of civilization, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers once carved their paths through the heart of Mesopotamia, the land still whispers in clay. Beneath layers of dust and ruin, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary, a black stone tablet, heavy and cold to the touch, covered in wedge-shaped marks that shimmer faintly under light. The symbols, written in cuneiform, were the words of the Sumerians, the first known writers of history. But this tablet, now called the Sumerian King List, was not a simple record of rule or conquest. It was something far stranger, a chronicle that claimed to reach beyond time itself. The King List is unlike any other ancient document. It begins not with ordinary reigns or dynasties, but with a declaration that sounds more like a myth than a record. When kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. What follows is a sequence of rulers who reigned for unimaginable lengths of time, thousands, even tens of thousands of years. One king is said to have ruled for 43,200 years, another for 36,000. Only after a great flood, it says, did the lengths of human reigns become shorter, bringing time down from the realm of gods to the realm of men. To modern historians, Such numbers are symbolic, perhaps metaphoric, a way of expressing divine favor or the immensity of early civilization. But to others, the king list reads like a memory of something more profound, a remnant of a forgotten age when human history brushed the edge of myth. Could these exaggerated reigns reflect something more? Perhaps echoes of a time before recorded civilization, when beings of great longevity or knowledge walked among humanity? Or is it simply poetry, the ancient way of making legends eternal? The list itself survives on several clay tablets and stone fragments found across Mesopotamia, each copy slightly different, but sharing the same backbone. A succession of cities and rulers stretching from the dawn of time to the dynasties of known history. Its most famous version, the well-blundell prism, now housed in the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford, is carved with incredible precision, each line of text a bridge across thousands of years. As scholars translated the cuneiform, they realized something fascinating. After the mythical early kings and the Great Flood, the names begin to align with verifiable historical rulers, kings whose cities, inscriptions, and monuments can be identified. It is as though the text moves gradually from myth into fact, from divine memory into human record. This seamless blending of the impossible and the verifiable has made the Sumerian king list one of the most haunting documents ever written. It stands at the threshold between legend and history, suggesting that the boundary between the two is not as clear as we like to imagine. When we read it today, we sense the hand of a people trying to remember their own beginnings, not as they were, but as they felt them to be. It is the oldest story of kingship, and perhaps the oldest attempt to understand time. Among the most intriguing sections of the text is its description of the Great Flood, a catastrophe that wiped away the earlier order of the world. This flood is not unique to Sumerian lore. It echoes across cultures, from the Epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical tale of Noah, from the Indian story of Manu to the Greek myth of Deucalion. It is as if humanity carries a collective memory of water, an ancient trauma preserved in every language. The king list, then, may not be literal history, but a coded remembrance of cycles of destruction and rebirth. Each long-lived ruler before the flood might symbolize an epoch, an age of the world lost to the rising seas. Still, the question lingers. How did the Sumerians know to speak of such events with such depth? Could they have preserved oral histories of real floods, passed down through generations? Or did they inherit these stories from even older cultures, people whose names and cities have long since turned to dust? Some researchers have suggested that the Sumerian civilization, often called the first, might itself have been heir to an earlier tradition, a forgotten culture that left behind fragments of its knowledge in myth and symbol. The king list, in this view, becomes not a fabrication but a translation, a retelling of truths so old they can only survive as legend. When you gaze upon the king list in a museum case, its lines of cuneiform feel alive despite their stillness. Each wedge pressed into the clay thousands of years ago carries the touch of a hand, the weight of intention. You can almost imagine the scribe hunched over his work by torchlight, clay tablet balanced on his knees, recording not just events but the very rhythm of existence. To him, perhaps, these are not myths but memories, the lineage of the world as it had always been told, descending from the stars, surviving the flood, continuing into his own time. It's easy to forget, when looking at ancient artifacts, that their creators were not unlike us. They wondered where they came from, why the world was the way it was, and how time could be captured before it slipped away. The king list is their answer, not a scientific document, but a sacred one. In it, kings become symbols, reigns become ages, and the flood becomes the curtain dividing the divine from the mortal. Even if the numbers defy belief, the message is eternal, that power, like life, flows in cycles, that everything rises and falls, that the order of heaven once touched the soil of earth. To some modern interpreters, especially those drawn to ancient astronaut theories or lost civilization myths, the king list holds even deeper significance. They see in it evidence of a forgotten epoch when advanced beings, whether gods, extraterrestrials, or something else, walked among humanity, guiding its early steps. The extraordinary lifespans of the first kings, they argue, may reflect the presence of entities who lived by different measures of time. Whether one accepts these interpretations or not, they underscore how the king list continues to spark imagination across centuries. It is both a historical puzzle and a philosophical mirror, reflecting our endless fascination with origins, power, and the interplay between myth and memory. In the end, the king list does not tell us who the first kings truly were, or whether they ever existed as the text claims. But it does something more profound. It reveals how deeply the human spirit needs continuity, how we weave time into stories to make sense of the vastness behind us. Even the act of inscribing those names into clay was a defiance of oblivion, a promise that what was once known should not be forgotten, even if its meaning fades. When you stand before it, you feel time collapsing. The kings of 10,000 years seem to breathe again for a moment, their shadows flickering across the edges of the tablet. Then the spell passes, and you are left only with clay and marks, and the sense that perhaps, somewhere deep beneath history's surface, there are still truths waiting to be read. And so, from the ancient cities of Sumer, our path drifts westward once more, across deserts and seas, toward another relic of stone that defies explanation. Deep in the frozen lands of Siberia, buried in permafrost and legend alike, lies a megalithic structure so vast it challenges the limits of known construction. The next mystery is the Siberian Valley of the Giants, where mountains of stone appear shaped by human hands long before humanity was meant to exist. In the far reaches of Siberia, where the wind howls like a memory across endless plains and the ground stays frozen for most of the year, there lies a place so vast and strange that even satellite images seem uncertain where nature ends and something older begins. Locals call it the Valley of the Giants, a region scattered with colossal stone blocks, some weighing hundreds, even thousands of tons, arranged in patterns that seem deliberate yet defy understanding. The stones rise from the tundra like the bones of the earth, fractured and half-buried, their surfaces scarred by time. And though the modern world knows Siberia as a place of exile and isolation, there are whispers that it may also guard one of humanity's oldest enigmas. From a distance, the valley appears as a landscape of broken mountains. But as one draws nearer, the formations seem to take on a strange regularity. Massive blocks that appear cut, stacked, and aligned as though by unseen engineers. Some explorers who have visited the region claim to have seen seams so straight they resemble ancient masonry, with angles and joints too precise to be accidental. Others report the presence of enormous rectangular stones piled upon one another in ways that suggest the remnants of walls or foundations, perhaps belonging to a structure so ancient that even glaciers could not fully erase it. Scientists, for their part, remain cautious. The Valley of the Giants sits in a geologically active region where frost, erosion, and tectonic movement can produce curious patterns that mimic human design. Granite and basalt, when fractured over millennia, can break into geometric shapes that look man-made to the untrained eye. But even among geologists, the site provokes fascination. The size and alignment of certain formations challenge easy classification. Nature may have shaped them, but it seems to have done so with an uncanny sense of architecture. Stories about the valley go back generations among the Yakut and Evenk peoples who inhabit these northern lands. They speak of giants who once walked the earth, beings of immense stature who built cities of stone before the world grew cold. In some versions, the giants angered the spirits of the sky, and their cities were shattered by fire and ice, leaving only ruins behind. Other tales speak of a sleeping race, buried beneath the mountains, waiting for the stars to align once more. These myths were long dismissed as folklore, until modern explorers stumbled upon the enormous blocks themselves. In the 1970s, reports began to circulate in Russian scientific circles about unusual megalithic formations in the southern Siberian mountains near Gornaya Shoria. Photographs taken during expeditions revealed stones of mind-bending scale, some estimated to weigh more than 2,000 tons, stacked and interlocked in patterns that seemed intentional. The images sparked a wave of speculation across the Soviet Union and beyond. Could these ruins be the remains of an unknown prehistoric civilization? Or was this merely an illusion created by nature's patient hand? For a brief time, the notion of a lost Siberian civilization caught fire in the imagination of researchers and dreamers alike. Some proposed that these ruins might date back to a time before the last ice age, perhaps more than 12,000 years ago, when the region was warmer and habitable. Others took an even bolder step, linking the site to the legends of Atlantis or to the mythic Hyperborea, a paradise of the far north described by ancient Greek historians. According to these old texts, Hyperborea was a land of perpetual sunlight and wisdom, inhabited by a peaceful, advanced race who eventually vanished beneath shifting ice. To believers, the Valley of the Giants seemed like the physical echo of that legend. Standing among the stones, one can understand why such theories persist. The scale alone is humbling. The air feels heavy with antiquity, the silence broken only by wind moving through cracks and crevices. Each block, with its smooth face and sharp edge, appears to challenge the limits of known human craftsmanship, especially if the site truly predates known civilization. To move even one of these stones would require technology or ingenuity far beyond what we attribute to prehistoric societies. And yet, there they stand, unmoved, defying both time and certainty. Some researchers have attempted to explain the formations through the lens of ancient cataclysm. They propose that the valley may have once been the site of a meteor impact or volcanic upheaval that fractured the landscape with unnatural precision. Over thousands of years, freeze-thaw cycles may have widened those cracks into the massive block-like forms we see today. It's a plausible explanation, but one that doesn't fully account for the eerie symmetry of certain arrangements, nor for the subtle alignments that seem to point toward celestial coordinates. The mystery deepens when we consider the sheer isolation of the site. The valley lies far from any known ancient settlement, deep in a region where survival itself would have been a constant struggle. If people did build here, who were they? How did they endure the brutal winters? What purpose would drive them to raise such monumental structures in the middle of nowhere? Were these fortresses, temples, or markers of something else entirely? Something we no longer have the words to describe? There's a strange peace that settles over the mind when imagining the valley's age. If the stones truly are remnants of a civilization, then we're looking at the residue of a story far older than Egypt, older than Sumer, older perhaps than memory itself. And if they're natural, then nature has composed its own cathedral, one so majestic and precise that it blurs the boundary between chance and intention. In both cases, we are faced with the same truth. That time is a sculptor more skilled than any hand that came after. At night, when the northern lights ripple across the sky above the valley, the stones appear to glow faintly, as though reflecting the colors of the aurora. It is easy to imagine that something ancient still stirs beneath them, not alive in the way we understand, but resonant with the quiet energy of the world's beginnings. Those who have camped nearby often speak of dreams, vivid, unsettling visions of towering figures, of cities rising and falling in cycles of fire and ice. Whether these are tricks of the subconscious or whispers from the land itself, no one can say. As the wind moves through the stones, it hums in low tones, a natural resonance that seems almost like a voice. Some say the valley sings. Others say it remembers. And perhaps those two things are the same. The earth holds its history not just in fossils and strata, but in places like this, where the visible and invisible overlap, where reason pauses and imagination takes its place. Eventually, dawn comes, and the first light spreads across the granite faces, illuminating cracks that look like seams between worlds. The Valley of the Giants stands unchanged, indifferent to all who come and go. Its mystery remains intact, untouched by science, undiminished by myth. From these frozen stones, our journey turns toward warmer lands once more, following the faint thread of legend that connects one enigma to another. If Siberia's mountains whisper of giants, then far across the Mediterranean, beneath the gentle hills of Crete, another relic speaks of monsters and labyrinths. There, in the ruins of Knossos, lies an artifact that ties myth to metal, a disc whose symbols no one can read, and whose message may never have been meant for human eyes. The Phaistos disc awaits. Beneath the golden light of the Cretan sun, where olive trees ripple in the warm breeze and the Aegean glimmers like a sheet of glass, lie the ruins of Knossos, the ancient heart of the Minoan civilization. Stone corridors twist beneath the earth, their walls painted with faded murals of bulls and dancers, gods and seas. Among these relics of an age lost to time, one small object has captivated the imagination of archaeologists and dreamers alike. A disc of fired clay, no larger than a man's hand, stamped on both sides with a spiral of mysterious symbols. It was found more than a century ago, yet no one has ever been able to read it. This is the Phaistos disc, an artifact that seems to whisper in an unknown tongue, a message from a world that has forgotten how to speak. The disc was discovered in 1908 by the Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier, buried in the ruins of the Minoan palace at Phaistos on the island of Crete. At first glance, it appears simple, a flat circle of baked clay, roughly 16 centimeters across. But a closer look reveals a pattern so deliberate and so strange that it feels almost modern. Pressed into its surface are 241 distinct symbols arranged in a spiral, winding inward from the edge toward the center. Each symbol was impressed into the clay while it was still wet using small stamps, an early form of movable type, perhaps the first in human history. The symbols themselves are unlike any known script. There are human figures, birds, fish, flowers, tools, and abstract signs that defy classification. Some seem to represent specific things: a head with a feathered crown, a plumed helmet, a shield, while others feel symbolic, like fragments of a language that once had meaning but now drifts beyond comprehension. The spiral arrangement is hypnotic, almost ritualistic, suggesting that the disc was more than a text. It was a ceremony, a journey inwards. Ever since its discovery, scholars have tried to decipher its code. They have compared it to Linear A and Linear B, the two other scripts of the Minoan world. Linear B, eventually decoded in the 1950s, revealed itself as an early form of Greek. But Linear A, in the script of the Phaistos disc, remains unbroken. Some believe it is a language unique to the Minoans. Others suspect it might come from a civilization even older, one that influenced Crete before recorded history began. The theories are as varied as the scholars who study them. Some suggest the disc was a hymn, a prayer to a forgotten god or goddess. Others believe it was a game board, a calendar, a charm of protection, or even an encoded map of the stars. A few more daring voices whisper that it might not be Minoan at all, that it could be an imported artifact, left behind by travelers or survivors from some lost civilization that vanished before the dawn of Greece. The possibility that it was created using movable stamps only deepens the mystery. If true, then the Phaistos disc represents a technological leap thousands of years ahead of its time. The earliest example of printed text in the world, predating Gutenberg by 3 millennia. To stand before it is to feel a kind of quiet awe. The disc rests today in a glass case at the Heraklion Archaeological Museum, bathed in soft light. Visitors gather around it in hushed tones, drawn by its perfect symmetry and the elegance of its unknown symbols. It has a presence that feels almost alive, as if the clay itself remembers the hand that pressed each mark. The spiral draws the eye inward, pulling the viewer into its rhythm. A slow, meditative turn toward the center, toward meaning that always slips away. There is something haunting about the idea of a message that has survived but can no longer be read. Language is how civilizations speak across time, how the dead leave their voices behind. The Phaistos disc carries a voice, clear, deliberate, enduring, but we have lost the ability to hear it. Its existence becomes a mirror for our own impermanence, a reminder that even the most careful expressions of thought can one day fall silent. The Minoans, who built labyrinths and traded across the seas, who worshipped gods of nature and fertility, left behind palaces and art, but not their words. Only this spiral remains, turning endlessly in its quiet plea to be understood. Some have speculated that the disc encodes not words but sound, perhaps music or chant, meant to be spoken or sung rather than read. Others see in it an astronomical pattern, a record of lunar cycles or solstices. A few even connect it to the myth of the labyrinth itself, the spiraling structure that housed the Minotaur in Greek legend. In that interpretation, the disc spiral is a symbolic map of the labyrinth, its journey from the outer edge to the center mirroring the hero's descent into the unknown. The Phaistos disc, then, becomes both story and symbol, an artifact that bridges myth and mathematics, art and eternity. Yet, there's another layer to its allure, the suggestion that it might be a forgery. A few skeptics have argued that Luigi Pernier could have crafted the disc himself, inspired by the Minoan motifs around him, eager for a discovery that would rival those of his contemporaries. But this theory falters under scrutiny. The clay's composition matches that of the ancient site. The wear and coloration are consistent with millennia of burial. The symbols, though unique, bear traces of genuine antiquity. If it is a hoax, it is one executed with a precision beyond the tools and materials of the early 20th century. What remains, then, is mystery, the kind that both humbles and soothes. The disc does not demand to be solved. It invites us instead to wonder. It speaks to a part of the human spirit that yearns for hidden knowledge, the same part that gazes at the stars and asks how long they've burned. In a world that often demands clarity, the Phaistos disc offers the comfort of ambiguity, the reassurance that not everything must be known to be meaningful. When the lights of the museum dim in the evening, and the last visitor has gone, the disc rests in its case like a sleeping eye. The faint reflections of passing lights shimmer across its surface, momentarily animating the ancient symbols, as if they might begin to turn once more. The spiral uncoiling, the story returning to life. Perhaps one day, someone will unlock its code. Or perhaps its secret was never meant to be deciphered at all. In the stillness of night, when the world slows and the mind drifts between thought and dream, the Phaistos disc feels like a whisper from that threshold, from the space between what we know and what we can only imagine. Its spiral seems to echo the shape of time itself, ever turning, ever repeating, carrying meaning that we sense but cannot grasp. From the island of Crete, our path winds onward again, across the blue waters of the Mediterranean, toward another enigma that bridges the ancient and the impossible. Far to the north, in the cold depths of the Baltic Sea, a discovery made by sonar in recent years has stirred new debate, a structure that seems both geological and artificial, resting silently beneath the waves. Some call it the Baltic Sea anomaly, and to those who have glimpsed it, it appears as though an ancient monument, or something not of this earth, sleeps beneath the ocean floor. Far beneath the dark waters of the Baltic Sea, between the coasts of Sweden and Finland, lies a shape so strange that even the instruments used to find it seem to hesitate. In June of 2011, a team of Swedish divers and treasure hunters known as OceanX was scanning the seafloor in search of shipwrecks when their sonar displayed something unexpected, a perfect circular formation, nearly 60 meters wide, resting 90 meters below the surface. It was massive, geometric, and eerily distinct from the chaotic patterns of natural rock around it. For a moment, they thought it was a glitch, an echo, a trick of light on the sonar screen. But it wasn't. Whatever it was real, and it didn't belong to any known category of geological formation. The Baltic Sea anomaly, as it came to be known, had entered the realm of both science and myth. The first images released to the public were haunting: a circular dome-like structure with radial ridges, a flattened top, and what seemed like a stairway or ramp leading toward its center. It sat at the end of a long seabed ridge, as though it had come to rest after sliding across the ocean floor. Some claimed it resembled a crashed craft. Others compared it to an ancient monument, perhaps a Stonehenge of the deep. Even the grainy sonar scans carried a peculiar gravity, their grainy lines hinting at a shape too deliberate to be dismissed outright. When divers first descended to examine it, they described textures and surfaces that felt unnatural, smooth, layered, even metallic in places. They noted what appeared to be right angles, corridors, and circular depressions. Some said their electronic equipment malfunctioned near the site. Cameras flickered, lights dimmed, and compasses spun aimlessly. Others reported no such issues, yet the stories persisted, feeding the growing mythology. Soon, newspapers and online forums buzzed with speculation. Had the team discovered the remnants of an ancient civilization swallowed by the sea? A Nazi structure from World War II? Or, as some dared to suggest, a spacecraft that had lain hidden since before recorded time? Scientists and geologists were quick to offer alternative explanations. The Baltic Sea, they noted, is rich in glacial formations, the scars of ancient ice sheets that once dragged across the seabed, shaping it into peculiar patterns. The anomaly, they argued, could simply be a glacial deposit, a remnant of the Ice Age, sculpted by erosion and sediment. Basalt formations, when fractured and smoothed by centuries of current, can appear geometric even when entirely natural. The staircase, they said, was an illusion formed by overlapping rock strata, and the circular shape, while unusual, was not impossible in a region once dominated by ice and pressure. Yet the mystery refuses to die, because the anomaly does not fit neatly within these explanations either. Its symmetry feels deliberate, its placement oddly centered at the end of a long, smooth trench, as though something massive had once landed or come to rest there. The divers described areas that seemed scorched, as if the seabed around it had been exposed to extreme heat at some point in the distant past. Some even claimed to have found what looked like blackened fragments, melted stone fused to the surrounding rock. Could this be evidence of an ancient impact, or perhaps a volcanic vent now dormant? No one knows for certain. The deeper allure of the Baltic anomaly lies not in the debate between science and speculation, but in the feeling it evokes, that quiet, haunting sense of encountering something beyond comprehension. Beneath the heavy silence of the ocean, light fades quickly. The divers move with slow precision, beams of blue-white light sweeping over dark stone. In those moments, surrounded by black water and infinite cold, the human mind begins to see more than rock. It begins to dream. Shapes become symbols. Patterns become purpose. The anomaly seems less like a geological feature and more like a message from a world that predates ours. Some fringe theorists have connected the anomaly to the flood myths that echo across human history. The same great deluge mentioned in the Sumerian tablets and the stories of Noah and Gilgamesh. Perhaps, they say, the Baltic structure was once part of a city that existed before the flood, now entombed by rising seas. Others reach further still, drawing parallels to Plato's description of Atlantis, with its concentric rings of land and water, a pattern eerily reminiscent of the sonar image of the anomaly. The circular form, the central dome, the smooth pathways leading inward. Could this be one of many Atlantean remnants scattered across the planet's hidden depths? Skeptics roll their eyes, of course. To them, the Baltic anomaly is a case study in human projection, how we see intention in randomness, how we turn stone into story. But perhaps that instinct is not foolishness, perhaps it's memory. Our ancestors looked at the stars and saw gods. They looked at mountains and saw thrones. To see design in the world is part of what makes us human. The Baltic anomaly, whether sculpted by hands or ice, awakens that same ancient impulse. to wonder who or what came before us and why they left so little behind. Over the years, further expeditions have revealed little new information. The cost and danger of deep-sea diving in the Baltic's frigid waters make exploration difficult, and official funding is scarce. The Ocean X team, though initially enthusiastic, faced criticism and dwindling support. Still, the images they captured continue to circulate, grainy, mysterious, endlessly interpreted. Scientists release new studies every few years reaffirming geological explanations. Yet the public imagination clings to its alternative possibilities. It is as though the anomaly exists in two realities at once, one of rock and sediment, and one of legend and wonder. In truth, perhaps it belongs to both. Nature and myth have always shared the same space, coexisting quietly until we arrive to separate them. The Baltic Sea anomaly could be a natural sculpture, an accident of stone shaped by eons of ice and current. And yet, to those who have seen it, there remains something unsettlingly deliberate about its form. It feels less like an accident and more like a relic from a forgotten age, preserved beneath the sea's slow-moving curtain. If one could stand upon it, if the waters were drawn away for just a moment, what would it look like under the open sky? Would it appear as a mound of rough stone, or would its lines resolve into something grander? The foundation of a monument, perhaps, or a vessel half embedded in the seabed. The mind drifts toward possibilities. Maybe it was once a fortress guarding a vanished coastline, or the temple of a drowned god. Maybe it was nothing more than the ocean's trick, and the meaning lies only in our search for it. In the end, the Baltic anomaly remains what all great mysteries are, a mirror. It reflects not the truth of the world, but the shape of our curiosity. Beneath the dark water, it sleeps, silent, patient, indifferent to the stories told above. Its contours are carved not just by time, but by the endless tide of human imagination. Each new diver who descends into the deep adds another layer to that mythology, another echo to the song of the unknown. When the sonar beams fade and the divers resurface, leaving behind only bubbles and darkness, the sea closes over the anomaly once more. The Baltic returns to its ancient rhythm, its cold waves erasing the day's disturbances. Down below, the circular shadow waits in eternal stillness. Whether it is temple or tomb, craft or coincidence, it has already achieved immortality, not through what it is, but through what we see in it. And now, as the last mystery of our journey drifts beneath the waves, we rise gently back toward the surface, toward air and light, toward reflection. The artifacts we've wandered through, from the sands of Sumer to the jungles of Colombia, from stone guardians to discs and devices, have all pointed to one enduring truth. That time is not linear, and the unknown is never far. In the quiet beyond discovery, in the space between science and story, we find the one relic that endures above all, wonder itself. Night descends gently, carrying with it the hush of centuries and the quiet weight of the past. Across continents and oceans, the lost artifacts we have traced, from the Antikythera mechanism to the Baltic Sea anomaly, sit in stillness, patient and silent. Each of them, whether buried, submerged, or preserved behind glass, holds a story half-remembered, a fragment of knowledge that seems both impossible and inevitable. They remind us that human history is larger than the records we keep, reaching back into shadows, into mysteries that resist explanation, into echoes that stir in the dark. These objects challenge our certainty. They're evidence that knowledge, once held, can vanish. The London hammer encased in stone, the statues of St. Augustine frozen in time, the spirals of the Phaistos disc, the impossible reigns of the Sumerian king list. Each confronts us with a world where fact and myth blur. And perhaps that is their purpose, not to be fully understood, but to awaken wonder, to remind us that there is still more to see, more to imagine, and more to dream. We are drawn to these mysteries because they speak to something within us, curiosity, humility, the desire to reach beyond the known. Their silence is not absence, but invitation. They urge us to reflect on what has been lost, what has survived, and how small our place in time truly is. Even as we catalog, measure, and theorize, the artifacts resist finality, teaching us that some knowledge is meant to remain just out of reach. In their stillness, we see ourselves, seekers of meaning, inheritors of wonder. The past, though hidden, waits patiently. And in that waiting, we find a quiet truth, that the capacity to marvel, to imagine, and to wonder is the thread that binds every age, every civilization, and every human soul together.